Live reports from D.C. on both processes within the House and the Senate this week. Let's start with Monday morning into June. And today and this week are going to feel more like June than yesterday and over the weekend with the chilly weekend. But we have a warm up on our way weather-wise, temperature-wise, J-Dog. By midweek, we're going to feel like we're in June. And we will see some of the haze and smoke this week from those Canadian wildfires. But good morning, New Hampshire. Good morning up into Maine. Mike Pont finishing up Morning Information Center, WTSN, AM and FM, 98.1 FM, 1270 AM on the Seacoast. And, of course, up into Portland, Maine, we have a new signal for you, 98.7 FM, HD2. Lakes region, we have you blanketed. Manchester, Concord, 107.7 FM. Good morning, New England. Good morning, worldwide. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google. Play the pulse of NH. We'll have a poll question for you in a moment once we get going up on X at the Pulse of NH, but a lot to talk about before we get into our regulars on a Monday morning. I'll start with J-Dog in the Capitol here, and hope you had a good weekend there, buddy. I haven't touched base with you, but I know you're probably on the go. Oh, that's right. YouTube. We have our YouTube channel cranking up in the first hour. If you want to watch just the Pulse of an H on YouTube, right, J-Dog? That's all you got to do, Pulse of an H. Everything. Our app, Pulse of an H, our website, our on-demand stuff. A couple stories we're going to touch upon locally. Story WMUR has about the FBI warning New Hampshire property owners about this quit claim property deed piracy scams where people basically forge documents to make it look like they own your property. Usually it's an out-of-state second home property that you're not living in. Next thing you know, someone's trying to sell it. We had that story for you weeks ago, first in the region, and we're going to have more from the FBI field agents from that interview where they were talking about how many millions of dollars property owners in New Hampshire and Maine have been out from this scam, and it's pretty diabolical, but we'll hear more in the 10 o'clock hour. We had that for you weeks ago when the FBI field office reached out to the show here. Yeah, well, I'm sorry, J-Dog? Yep, field agents talking about this, and there are things you can do. There are things to do, but basically it's people preying on homes that might be in between rentals, a second home where you're only down there seasonally. And next thing you know, they're filing and forging deed and quit claim documents and then adding to that. So the next thing you know, the city or town, this could be a home in Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina. All of a sudden they think that, someone else owns it. And then they contact a real estate agent. Next thing you know, your house is for sale or they're borrowing money against it. But it's a big deal. We're going to have more from the FBI this morning. I don't know where to start. Let me start with foreign policy. In Turkey, the peace talks continue. I don't know how much progress they're going to make. I don't know if you caught this. This will probably be a movie someday, and I mean this sincerely. But I don't know if you heard about over the weekend. And this is what the Ukrainian secret special forces. They had a secret mission. This is an amazing story, actually. They basically, for months, Ukraine's been plotting and planning. It was called Spider's Web. It's almost like an espionage World War II type movie. But they basically worked hard to, in little log homes that were being transported into Russia from hired drivers who had no idea, these little like tiny homes that they were transporting, like little tiny like log homes, if you will, or something like you put in the backyard. They had these things rigged with drones that where the roof of the log home would open remotely. They got a bunch of these in and around a whole stretch of air bases inside Russia. This is Ukrainian special forces. The attack was carried out 29 years to the day, actually, that Ukraine handed over dozens of the same strategic bombers to Russia, along with a bunch of strategic nuclear warheads in exchange for them never being attacked by Russia. So there was some significance, but these little wooden cabins. The roof compartments were opened up remotely, and they got into an area of airstrips inside Russia from northern Russia down to Siberia, more than 2,000 miles from Ukraine, and they struck remotely these drones, and they took out, I don't know, different reports, like $1.5 billion of strategic nuclear aircraft and different types of bombers, and it was quite an operation. They destroyed one of the big mainstay aircraft that are used basically to control operations from up above. They took out a bunch of stuff. So And then Russia retaliated with a unprecedented number of drone strikes into Ukraine. So how those sides are going to get any progress in Turkey today is beyond me. It was a pretty tense weekend. We'll see where that goes. Of course, the other big story is we are hearing now much more about the suspect in Colorado, and this is just a terrible middle of the day, shirts off, holding these basically, man-made flamethrowers that he threw into the crowd. Now there has been one confirmed death, so now this has escalated in a terror attack to a murder charge, federal. But they have the suspect. He now faces a murder charge in that Boulder, Colorado attack on a pro-Israeli group. Speaking of anti-Semitism, of course, he was chanting "Free Palestine." That was basically calling for the release of the Hamas hostages, and he did this. Lived in the area. He's in custody, and just a terrifying, terrible story. Just god awful story. But again, it underscores what I've said in some commentary about all the stuff on college campuses, and you see of course, I don't forget it, but a few weeks ago, that wonderful young couple in Washington D.C. just left an event outside the Jewish Museum in Washington. They worked for the Israeli consul embassy. They're about to be married the next week, and they were murdered, gunned down by a terrorist as well, who was chanting free Palestine," and some other chants that call for the obliteration of Israel, basically. So this anti-Semitism is getting quite serious here domestically, not only on college campuses but with individual attacks. And my point is, you can talk about free Palestine all day long, and you can talk about the number of people who've died in Gaza after Hamas attacked Israel. But why is there not more talk about from these people that are so anti-Israel, anti-Semitic? The MIT graduating student who was blasting Israel and accusations of genocide and all these things against Israel and anti-Semitism. And interesting, I referenced that with the Ukrainian attack because I mentioned it was like a World War II movie, but I won't get into World War II and how many Jewish people were slaughtered and butchered and systematically tortured and murdered by Nazi Germany, 6.2 million. But when you talk about free Palestine, I wish some of these people who have become so anti-Israel, so anti-Jewish, so anti-Semitic would be talking about getting rid of Hamas. You want free Palestine when you get rid of the terrorist organization that governs and rules in Gaza. And then you can pinpoint, if you could, for me on a map where Gaza is, I'd be highly impressed. But the suspect in Boulder, in Colorado, was an Egyptian national. He was here illegally, and he's in custody now. That's been upgraded to a murder charge because of the death of at least one of the victims in that crowd, setting the victims literally on fire as he was yelling anti-Semitic chants and things to the people. Captured on video as well. Pretty terrifying. All right, we are going to take a break. We're going to go to D.C. We're going to check in with some of our regular contributors on the process in the Senate now with the so-called big, beautiful bill on the spending side. Senators have concern about the debt, and now it's close to, $37 trillion debt, probably some good concerns. But Speaker Johnson saying that they're going to have other reconciliation bills coming up, which will deal with cutting the spending. Also, a new leader in Poland, speaking of NATO and the Ukraine, new leader in Poland, a conservative, wins the presidency. Well, I won't get into some foreign policy, but Poland's got an interesting system. The president of Poland is not just a figurehead, but it is a parliamentary system. So the prime minister probably has more day-to-day governing power, but the Polish president does have power to basically direct the nation strategically as well as veto certain things, but a conservative taking over the helm in Poland. Hey, Alexa, hey, Google, play the Pulse of an H. Jack, Heath, J-Dog on the boards. Back with Neil Levesque, St. Anselm College. Then we'll go to D.C. We'll also check in with Doug Tengden on the economic side of the economy and a whole lot more. Back in a moment. Mm. All right, welcome back as we bring in Neil Veck, St. Anselm College Institute of Politics. Our poll question up on X this morning at the Pulse of an H is simply: are you confident there'll be a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine? And at this point, I'm getting more pessimistic. But what do you say? It's poll questions up. Do you think there'll be a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia? Yes or no? J Dog, our results from Friday. The holdouts. All right, Neil Vec, big beautiful bill. Speaker Johnson taking to the airways over the weekend. Now in the Senate, the House has more. It's going to be interesting to see really what happens over the next few weeks. And meanwhile, New Hampshire's dealing with trying to put their own 2-year budget to bed. Take it away, Neil. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know the intricacies, but a couple of the senators, very, very concerned about the debt, and they should be. We're getting up to $37 trillion now. Speaker Johnson says there will be some spending reductions based on the Doge stuff coming and other reconciliation stuff. But this is all going to be, we're going to find out a few things, but who's really running the show in terms of the Senate and back to the House, and of course, how visible or not President Trump and the White House will be exerting pressure on both chambers. Yeah. Yeah. Locally, you and I were talking before the show this morning. Just locally, it seems things are kind of in that, early summer, getting into summer mode, but quiet in terms of who's going to jump in to fill out some of these races, big political races with the midterm, even though it seems, you know, more like a year and a half away politically from a calendar point of view in the U.S. Senate race, or if you're running for governor or any of these big seats, it's not that far. So Scott Brown, arguably on the Republican side, jockeying for that U.S. Senate primary poll position, but yet, not officially saying he's in yet, but not really doing anything or showing anything that would say he's not. Chris Pappas, of course, is I think enjoying the frozen field for Democrats, the first district the congressman running for the U.S. Senate, and again on the Republican side, how much behind the scenes maneuvering is going on, and what's the White House thinking? Because it is a big seat. You were just talking about the thin, difference between the balance of power in the Congress and the Senate, and these seats are important. And you look at that U.S. Senate seat in New Hampshire, will be one of the biggest. It is probably the biggest race in New Hampshire's political history coming up. Does the White House want Scott Brown to be the Republican nominee, the Trump White House, now that Chris Sununu's not running? Yes or no? Will someone else emerge? And we're still seeing things relatively quiet among the Republicans running in the first congressional district primary. Stephanie Shaheen now and is a Democrat. She was on the show the other day. Mara Sullivan also in that race, and then also no big Democrats jumping into the governor's race yet. So take away kind of New Hampshire's political musical chairs here. Well, right, but why? If it's so far out, why did Chris Pappas jump in so early? Yep, yep. Hmm. You're on a I think a different kind of college campus, but you saw what happened in Boulder, Colorado, broad daylight. This arguably pro-Israeli group, but a group calling for the release of the Hamas hostages. This one nut job terrorist from an Egyptian national here illegally goes out there, shirt off, broad daylight, throws basically flamethrower incendiary device into a crowd. Now there's one person died from the burn. So now it's a murder, terrorist, everything investigation. But, if you look at the last few weeks, I'm going to point this out. It's a second individual terrorist attack against a couple or people supporting Israel. The last, of course, in Washington, D.C. I didn't hear a lot of condemnation on this nationally from some leading Democrats or certainly the View host. But the young couple leaving that Jewish museum in Washington, D.C., I think it was a Wednesday evening a few weeks ago. They were going to get married the next week. They worked in the embassy, murdered, just shot down by another nut job terrorist who was calling, free, free Palestine and other chants that equate to the obliteration of Israel. So this stuff is getting, pretty serious, pretty fast. And I see a very divided, younger. I mean, I look at college campuses and I question a few things, and I'll stop in 30 seconds and let you respond. I question if some of these so-called professional agitators or protesters or even some professors could even pinpoint for me on a map where Gaza is in the world, or if they could tell me what the governing political body of the Palestinian people in Gaza is. I don't know if they would say the word Hamas, and I don't know if they could define for me the charter of Hamas starting in 2017 and what they stand for as a terrorist organization, and that is the complete obliteration of Israel. So, what I'm curious in the people that are chanting Free Palestine, and they've grown to despise and hate Israel and the Jewish people, blaming them for the genocide and the deaths in Gaza of Palestinians, not mentioning October 7th. Why don't more of the Free Palestine people talk about if you want to really free Palestine in Gaza, get rid of Hamas, the terrorist organization, which is your government? I don't know if they care about that or not. Actually, a couple years now. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I hear you. All right, Neil. Thank you on a Monday, Neil Levesque. Thank you. By the way, new series coming to Netflix. I thought of you. I think it's called The Waterfront, but check it out. All right, about a fishing group. All right, thank you. All right, we'll come back. Brad Card. We'll talk more about the big bill, what happens now in the Senate, and we'll hear more from the FBI. Weeks ago, we were the first to have for you in the region this scam where basically especially with second homeowners property. If you own property like a second rental investment property or a home in Florida, you don't get down too much, or South Carolina, that house sits empty for a while. These quit claim or property pirates are forging documents. Next thing you know, they're filing stuff in the local register of deeds, and it looks like they own the property. Then they start borrowing against it or using it or selling it, and you don't even know about it. Well, the FBI, are going to have more from the FBI from that interview, but it's really millions and millions of dollars each year. People in New Hampshire and Maine who own largely second homes are falling victim to. Hey, Alexa, hey, Google, play the Pulse of an H on a Monday. Jack Heath, J Dog on the boards, back in a few. All right, we are back, and we have where you can watch live streaming. Here you go. Pulse of an H on YouTube, 9 to 10, Monday through Fridays. The Pulse of an H on YouTube. We have our own channel as we get going, and you can hear my background on that. All right, a lot going on this morning. We'll come back to some of the other topics, but we were talking earlier with Neil Levesque about the big, so called beautiful bill that passed the House. Now in the Senate, And there are signs that this could be changed quite a bit. Some of the senators openly expressing concern about, the bill on the spending side, adding to the national debt, which is now hovering at about $37 trillion. And Speaker Johnson saying some of the Doge stuff and spending cuts will be formalized in upcoming reconciliation bills. But this is an area Brad Card, one of our political analysts and all stars, knows very well on the congressional side, also co host of Contact Politics. We have a brand new edition for you tomorrow afternoon about 2 o'clock. Good morning, Brad. Well, I guess the question is, and I don't know if anyone really knows, but you would, what is going to happen with this process now in the Senate? Because it has a lot to do really with the Trump agenda, the midterms, and all the above. Take it away. Right. Any any pre- any predictions how it's going to wind up? Because it could. The problem is if the Senate changes it too much, Brad Card, am I right? Speaker Johnson in the House doesn't really have that big of a majority to play with in terms of Democrats are against it. So if 5 or 8 Republicans don't want what the Senate does, nothing passes. But right, but right, right. But whatever the Senate gets across the line, it would have to concur with the House or not. So right, but my question is, we've seen in the past the House become so like herding cats on the Republican side, where if they vote the speaker out, I mean, the next thing you know, you have a battle of who's speaker. If they can't pass something, I'm just wondering, how does Johnson hold this all together if the Senate's going to change it that much? No, I do, I agree. I agree. Interesting. What else is catching your eye? I mean, obviously, second, you looked at what happened in Washington, D.C., of that young couple leaving the Jewish Museum, the Israeli embassy couple murdered by one terror suspect now in Boulder, Colorado. What else? That's big stuff. The situation in Ukraine, incredible back and forth, kind of a covert secret mission by Ukrainians, special forces using those small log homes trucked into more than 2,000 miles of uh, away from Ukraine into Russia, those air bases. I know, I know, I know. Planning that, but what I don't see much hope of a peace talks there now between the drone strikes back into Ukraine. But what's anything else catch your eye before we go to the break? Mhm. All right, Brad Card live in DC. Thank you, Brad, and Contact Politics, new edition tomorrow afternoon. Thanks, Brad. All right, we come back. Doug Tengden looking at the economy. Federal Reserve unlikely to lower the interest rates, although I think they should this month, but they're always a dollar late or, too late, too little, too late. Doug Tengden, worldmarketadvisors.com. Hey, Alexa, Google, play the Pulse of an H. Jack Heath, J Dog on the boards. We are up on YouTube, the Pulse of an H, streaming live if you want to watch and listen. Back in a moment. All right, top of the next hour, we're going to hear from the Boston FBI field office, a field agent talking about this property pirates, they call them quit claim deed pirates. They forge documents primarily of and there's a lot of people in New Hampshire, Maine, New England that own a second home in the South, for example, and they don't use it a lot. They don't get there much. They own it, and it's all up to speed and all that. But if it's not lived in all the time, these pirates they call them, these quit claim property deed pirates cruise around and will start forging and filing false property documents in the local city or town, registrar's office. Next thing you know, there's a debate over who owns the property, and they're using it to borrow money against it or selling it by getting a realtor and having a quick open house and trying to sell it quickly for a low ball offer. Next thing you know, the rightful owner doesn't realize, they don't own the home anymore, and that this basically is stolen from them. It's millions of dollars in terms of damages to victims. We're going to hear from the Boston field office. We had that for you a few months ago. We want to share it with you again. The local story on it today in WMUR, but we first had that, and I think it was April 2nd. The Boston field office reached out to our show here at the Pulse of an H, saying, "Hey, can we get someone on? We're seeing increasing numbers of property owner victims happening." So we'll have more for you at that top of the 10 o'clock. Doug Tengden, excuse me, World Market Advisors, looking at the economy. It's still a mixed bag because a lot of questions, a lot of questions. I think Doug's joining us on this Monday morning as he does. Good morning, Doug. I'm okay, thanks. Well, what do we know that's different than Friday? We talked a little bit about the inflation stuff might be cooling, but yet still a lot of uncertainty. A lot of uncertainty in real estate. Affordable housing price crisis is getting worse, not better. Um, it's real funny. I wanted to share one story with you because I like stories. I think they're a barometer. When I used to run WMUR's news, I used to listen to like stories at the bus stop. You go out to a restaurant, just listen, talking to people. So I was on the Seacoast over the weekend on Saturday, and out, and we sitting next to us in a restaurant, pub place down by the waterfront near the tugboats. Three younger guys who work professionally, went to UNH, University of New Hampshire, live in Portsmouth, renting, and they're all working in corporate type jobs. One is a development officer at one of the most prestigious prep schools in New England. They all have good jobs, presumably probably up around a minimum of 100 grand a year, I'm guessing, and they all are professional, mid to late 20s, and they rent. And they have a budget for buying something, but they can't afford anything in Portsmouth, and they're doing well and working full time. And even if they're willing to stretch and borrow a little more, everything is out of their price range, and their budget is sort of in that, 600, 650, 700 max range to buy a condo or anything, and they're working full time and they can't afford it. Yeah, and just the price of things in some markets. I mean, Portsmouth, you really can't get anything that's worth living in, which is unbelievable to say this. I can't believe it. Under $1 million. And I'm talking like, where you wouldn't have to do over the kitchen and bathrooms and spend a couple hundred. It's just nothing. You're not going to find anything like for 5 or 600,000 to their point. So 20 minutes outside of the area, you can find something, but even then it's barely affordable. And their budget's not small. I mean, they're working full time. One of these guys said, look at, my dad had a business in Meredith, a home building business. He talks to me all the time about buying something versus rent. The rent, by the way, is now getting closer to 2,500 a month. It started at 1,500 a month a year and a half ago. So they're looking to buy something, and it probably is not going to be in the area if they want to own a home, or they stay in the area and rent. Yeah. All right. What are we seeing on the day to day consumer side? Well, we've talked about it. It's probably their staff. You educated me. It's their overeducated PhD staff, which is telling them why not to do anything versus the leaders in there who should tell the staff, this is what we're doing, make the best of it. All right, thank you. Thank you, Doug. Worldmarketadvisors.com. Thank you, Doug. All right. We have a lot coming up. We have some live stuff. We're going to be over at Gino's great famous chowder and sandwich shop down in Portsmouth on a Friday coming up. We'll give you dates as we get closer. Oh, that's coming up. There you go. Not that far away. And don't be afraid. Come by and get a beautiful, delicious their chowders, their stew, their lobster rolls. I even love their tuna type BLT sandwiches. But Gino's been there. It's been a landmark. Francesca and the team will be there live. They're right down there, Prescott Park, Pierce Island. It's just a mainstay, Mechanic Street in Portsmouth. And then we have some Concord Days coming up here. We're going to be live downtown. So we got a lot coming up. To check it all out, go to the Pulse of NH for all our stuff. And our poll question up on X is: do you think there will be a do you think that there'll be a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia? I'm becoming increasingly pessimistic at this point, especially with the volley of drones and that inside sort of secret mission job Ukraine did deep inside Russia of their strategic jets and nuclear airplanes and capabilities. It was just incredible, like World War II spy MI6 espionage, and they pulled it off using these little log cabins that were trucked into Russia with unsuspecting civilian drivers in these roofs. I mean, they had an area with the roofs remotely. They could remove them once they were on trailers inside Russia, deep in like 2,500 miles from Ukraine, near all the air bases and northern Russia, Siberia. And in there were drones that were remotely controlled, and they took out some of these like more than $1.5 billion of nuclear air power, if you will, for Putin. And then Russia responded with an incredible, unprecedented amount of drone attacks into Ukraine. And then the two sides have envoys and emissaries meeting in Turkey. I getting a little more pessimistic that you're going to see an end of this war anytime soon. Meanwhile, there's a new leader in Poland. Speaking of NATO and neighboring countries, in Poland, a conservative wins the presidency of Poland. Hey Alexa, hey Google, play the Pulse of an Inch. When you come back, we're going to hear a real warning to New Hampshire and Maine property owners who have second homes, primarily in markets outside of here where you may not live there full time, but you own that home. Guess what? The FBI field office is telling you: check your deeds, check your property stuff, have people checking your home, get some kind of protection on the title searches because there are pirates out there online forging deed and property documents, and you don't even know you don't own the home anymore. It's coming up next. The Pulse of an H, Jack Heath, J Dog in the Woods. Back in a moment.